Hello, this is News for Scotland. I'm Yvonne Alexis, standing in for Hugh Stewart, who's on annual leave. I'm going to start with the COVID inquiry. For the past 2 weeks, the COVID inquiry has moved its focus and its locus to Scotland, sitting in Edinburgh to examine the Scottish Government's response to the pandemic. This week, former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon took the stand. As with other senior politicians, including Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, current First Minister Humza Yousaf, and health representatives including Jason Leach, she has been asked in detail about deleted WhatsApp messages, a matter which has taken up a great deal of the inquiry's time, both in Edinburgh and in London. Ms Sturgeon answered a wide range of questions during a lengthy 7-hour interrogation. Generally, however, the inquiry has focused on whether or not Ms Sturgeon had acted too hastily in banning large gatherings, and whether that and other decisions were about playing politics rather than considering the best interests of the public. At times tearful, Ms Sturgeon acknowledged that she felt deeply sorry about some aspects of her decision-making, and that she would wish to have acted differently with the benefit of hindsight. Michael Gove had stated in his evidence to the same inquiry that he had felt at the time that Ms Sturgeon had jumped the gun in shutting down large gatherings, although others might argue that the real issue was that Westminster had not shut them down quickly enough. Family and friends of many lost through COVID did not receive this evidence comfortably, convinced that their loved ones had died unnecessarily due to failings by both the Scottish Government and the UK Government. In his evidence earlier in the inquiry, Michael Gove had intimated that he and others in Westminster were irritated by the Scottish Government's response to COVID and its intent to differentiate from what the UK Government was doing, which he believed was motivated by a desire to push the independence agenda. In her evidence, Kate Forbes, former Finance Minister, said that she hadn't deleted WhatsApp messages and had no knowledge of this being deemed essential until January 2022. She had not deleted messages prior to that date. She further expressed surprise that minutes of Scotland's Resilience Committee had not been kept as a matter of course. Former Health Secretary Jean Freeman had also expressed her surprise at WhatsApp messages being deleted, stating that it hadn't even occurred to her to do so. Evidence from John Swinney is ongoing at the moment, and the inquiry will continue in Scotland this week before moving to Wales. The UK and Scottish governments have unveiled their plans to ban disposable vapes and raise the tobacco age of sale in a bid to lower smoking rates. In plans for all 4 UK countries, officials are also looking to restrict vape flavours and introduce plainer packaging in order to curb the appeal to the younger generation. The legislation will ban the sale of single-use vapes as well as make it illegal to sell tobacco products to anyone born on or after January 1st, 2009. The new law will also restrict vape flavours, change the way vapes are displayed in stores as well as how product packaging appears. It will bring new powers for local authorities to issue fixed penalty notices for any breaches of the age of sale legislation for vapes and tobacco products. Recent research by the UK Government in a consultation starting in October 2023 has already shown evidence that the number of children using vapes in the last 3 years has tripled, with 9% of 11 to 15-year-olds now using disposable vapes. Vaping alternatives such as nicotine pouches will also be outlawed for children. The UK Government also said that single-use vapes have only exacerbated the rise in youth vaping, with those aged 11 to 17 years old using disposables increasing by 9 times as much in the last 2 years. Scotland's Public Health Minister Jenny Minto said, "Smoking damages lives and kills more than 8,000 people a year in Scotland. It is a burden on our NHS and social care services." Research also suggests that almost 1 in 5 adolescents have tried vapes. Scotland's Innovation Minister Richard Lochhead has set out Scotland's space ambitions at a UK Space Agency summit in Edinburgh. The Minister said the space industry is one of the star attractions in Scotland's emerging technology sector. He told UK Space Agency Space Investment Forum that the country intends to capture a £4 billion share of the global space market and expects to employ 20,000 people in the space sector within a decade in jobs such as manufacturing small satellites or supporting rocket launches. Saxavord Spaceport in Shetland is in line to host the UK's first vertical launch later this year, with Mr Lockhead telling investors attending the summit that space is one of the key industries the Scottish Government has pinpointed as an economic priority. Recent developments mean that we are quite genuinely on the cusp of something new and exhilarating, he said. We are ideally located for launching satellites into orbit, and projects at Saxavord and Sutherland are progressing well. The biggest city, Glasgow, hosts a thriving satellite manufacturing hub, and our space supply chain is working flat out to grasp the transformational opportunities presented. These range from developing zero-emissions rocket launches to using data generated from space to tackle climate change. Space opens a window that allows mankind to observe our world with ever greater clarity. Scotland has set some of the most ambitious targets for cutting emissions anywhere. The space industry can propel our green and growing economy to new heights.
You're listening to News for Scotland's Newscast 14 on Friday 2nd February 2024. It's news where we are. I return you now to Yvonne.
A constructive dismissal case is currently underway in Edinburgh against Rape Crisis Centre, Edinburgh. Ros Adams, a counsellor, said she was told that revealing the biological sex of support workers was transphobic, even if it was done to reassure a rape survivor that she'd be talking to another female. For many sexually abused women, a male presence can cause distress. The Equality Act uses rape counselling as an example of a service where it is proportionate to discriminate, for example, by restricting counselling jobs. The 10 Act is also clear that men who identify as women, it uses the term transsexual, can be excluded in such circumstances. In an article for Holyrood magazine, Joan McAlpine, former MSP, has written that evidence from the Employment Tribunal involving Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre stirred some distressing memories. She points out that a service designed to help traumatised women appears to have forgotten its core purpose. Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre claims to be a women-only space. However, the tribunal heard it believes a woman is anyone who identifies as such, even those with male bodies. In one example, a 60-year-old woman who inquired if male-born people would attend her support session was allegedly turned away. Rape Crisis Scotland last week took the unusual step of issuing a statement about the Edinburgh Tribunal before evidence concluded. The umbrella group seemed to distance itself from the Edinburgh Centre, saying services should be survivor-centred and protect dedicated women-only spaces. In Ms McAlpine's words, the effrontery of this defies belief. She points out that the leadership of Rape Crisis Scotland has been a cheerleader for the removal of women's sex-based rights. It fully supported the Gender Recognition Reform Act and the notion of self-ID, and failed to endorse former Labour MSP Joanne Lamont's successful amendment to the Forensic Services Bill, designed to ensure victims of sexual assault could choose the sex of their medical examiner. Ms McAlpine goes on to say that for several years ago she was approached by several women who needed to access rape crisis support but wanted the assurance of a female-only service. They were concerned about statements by Muridul Wadwa, a trans-identified male, who then ran Forth Valley Rape Crisis and had a senior role training volunteers in the service across Scotland. Wadwa publicly criticised the part of the Equality Act that allowed jobs in the violence against women sector to be reserved for females. The Forth Valley Rape Crisis Twitter page was illustrated with a photograph of protesters brandishing a pink and blue trans rights flag. Joan McAlpine contacted the Chief Executive of Rape Crisis Scotland, Sandy Brindley, to request a meeting. It was a sensitive undertaking. These were distressed women. Most had not met each other in person. The meeting took place in the offices of Edinburgh Rape Crisis, which was welcoming and comfortable. Joan McAlpine, Sandy Brindley and the representative of Edinburgh Rape Crisis gave their full names and job titles. The women used first names only and shared their stories. One introduced herself simply as Sharon, and it was assumed she was one of the survivors. However, Sharon soon became quite vocal, asserting that it was against the law to insist your rape counsellor was biologically female, something other experts on the Equality Act dispute. She was, it turned out, Sharon Cowan, a professor of feminist and queer legal studies, a high-profile trans rights campaigner who has submitted evidence to both the UK and Scottish Parliaments on reform of the Gender Recognition Act, advocating for gender self-ID. Bringing a third-party campaigner to a meeting of such vulnerable women without asking their permission or even offering an introduction was and remains astounding to Joan. And indeed, Brindley later apologised for this oversight in an email. She later claimed that Cowan was there to offer a legal perspective, and they did not know the women were survivors. However, contrary to that, the email sent to Brindley by Joan's staff had explained the women's backgrounds. There were assertions made during that meeting that anyone who identifies as a woman could be a rape counsellor or join a group session. And when survivors asked how a woman may feel if she unknowingly disclosed details of her rape to a male counsellor on the telephone, no adequate answer was provided. It shocked Joan then, as it still does now, that given 100% of rapes in Scotland are committed by men, this would be an issue for the head of Rape Crisis Scotland. It became apparent, some years later, that this did not concern others in the network when Meriddle Wadwa was appointed Chief Executive of Edinburgh Rape Crisis and immediately and notoriously suggested in a podcast interview that abused women could be bigots and counselling services may help them reframe their trauma. Much of this has been explored during the current tribunal case. Rape Crisis Scotland and the network it serves receive large sums of public money, some of which in Edinburgh's case is paying the services of a KC to fight this case. It's legitimate to ask how they use this resource. Like other government-funded official women's organisations in Scotland, Rape Crisis says sex self-ID causes no problems, but what Joan makes clear is that she can't forget being in the room when its CEO heard those women, saw their distress and knew they were self-excluding from a service they needed. The women made a meeting note which Brindley later disputed as being an accurate reflection, but it seemed from a participant perspective, as Joan had, that it was an accurate summary, and it informs this article. The women later shared their experience of that meeting with the Scottish Parliamentary Committee examining the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. It seems nobody paid them much attention then. Joan McAlpin hopes that in light of recent revelations from the Employment Tribunal, they are believed now. That's this week's news from me. We'll go now to Jeanette, who has a report on the impacts of big business on the Indigenous peoples of the Amazon, and how to become a Scottish citizen in an independent Scotland. Jeanette.
Thanks, Yvonne. Hi folks, Jeanette Hill here. Based on an article by Susanna Camargo in a publication called Mongabi, which focuses on the rainforest and environmental issues, she explains in this the ongoing issues in the Amazon. So according to a study signed by 35 scientists from all over the world, more than 1 million square miles of what remains of the Amazon forest are suffering from degradation. This is more than 10 times the size of UK. And degradation is more difficult to measure than deforestation, which we're more familiar with. And this is driven, she says, by 4 main things: forest fires, timber extraction, extreme droughts intensified by climate change, and edge effects. Deforestation is the removal of trees and the conversion to another land use, which is normally agriculture, but degradation occurs in the forest that is left. Severe disturbances could lead to the loss of most trees, but if the land use does not change, it is degradation and not deforestation, as Barlow explains. According to the analysis based on previous studies conducted between 2001 and 2018, 38% of what remains of the Amazon forest, that is, what has not been deforested yet, suffers from some type of degradation caused by human action. This will contribute to increased global temperature. A forest degraded by serious disturbances such as fires has a very different structure, and this impacts on the species that live in it, whether they are animals or plants. And the communities that live around it also begin to suffer. The study exposes those who benefit from those forest degradation disturbances and those who suffer. Her article states, in the case of timber extraction, for example, it is the regional and global actors, including companies and industries, that pocket the highest profits, leaving local workers to deal with any conflicts and violence arising from the activity, or at least with the impact of the scarcity of vegetation on the supply of water resources. It seems the Amazon, what's left of it, is under attack again. Former Brazil President Jair Bolsonaro's supporters in Congress and their agribusiness allies are celebrating yet again. They won the vote to override President Lula's veto of a horrible law speeding up the destruction of the Amazon and expelling more than 1 million indigenous people from their homes. According to the campaigning group ECO, these right-wing lawmakers are also lining up their attacks aimed at erasing more protections for indigenous land rights. A new battle is underway between Bolsonaro's supporters in Congress and Brazil's Supreme Court. ECO says Congress is on the verge of passing a terrifying new law that will rip open the heart of the Amazon for industrialisation and expel more than 1 million indigenous people from their homes. It needs to pass the Senate first, and they have a plan to stop that for good, which includes rallying international support as it has done before. Brazil's powerful agricultural lobby has spared no cost to push this dangerous law through. ECO claims they keep their lobbying in the shadows and they have given politicians cover to vote for this outrageously inhumane bill. This is a death sentence for the Amazon and the indigenous communities they call home. Bill number 490 passed through Brazil's conservative lower house of Congress recently. If passed through the next house, it would give the government the right to reclaim land from indigenous communities, invalidating their claims to their land if they can't prove they physically lived there on a specific day in 1988, and it would open the floodgates to new roads, dams and mines on protected indigenous lands. The organisation Human Rights Watch has condemned the bill previously, saying it will be extremely harmful to indigenous rights. Brazil's top court ruled in favour of indigenous people in September last year, and it seemed a great victory. But it seems these rights are under threat again. The bill goes to Brazil's Senate next. If it passes there, Brazilian President Lula could still veto it, but with enough support from Congress, they could override his veto. The Guardian reported on this bill in May last year, saying indigenous leaders and environmentalists in Brazil voiced horror after lawmakers approved the controversial legislation, which opponents fear will strike a devastating blow to indigenous communities and isolated tribes. Members of Brazil's conservative-dominated lower house overwhelmingly endorsed the bill in May, giving it 283 votes to and 155 against. Sarah Brown, writing again from Mongabe, said, Brazil's Congress pushed through a new law that includes several anti-indigenous measures that strip back land rights and open traditional territories to mining and agribusiness. It includes this controversial time frame idea, as previously said in this report. The decision provoked outrage among activists who say the new law is the biggest setback in Brazil for decades on indigenous rights. Both President Lula and the Supreme Court have previously called the measures in the bill unconstitutional and against public interests. Indigenous organisations again intend to challenge the law. In May, they had a magnificent protest in the House of Congress where Indigenous people covered their hands in the red dye of annatto seeds to say, you are killing us, you're killing the Amazon, you will be killing us. Led by the Indigenous Congresswoman leader, Celia Escaraba. She led the campaign to take the fight to court. And again, as I say, they won in September, but it seems the fight is not over. And again, the bill has been passed through Congress and will go forward to the Senate. Let's hope we can support them. And please support ECO, if you can, to challenge this bill again. So how would you become a Scottish citizen? If Scotland chooses to be an independent country, how would you become a Scottish citizen? Different pathways to citizenship have been proposed in a government paper called Choosing to Become a Scottish Citizen, published in July last year. Citizens of Britain and Ireland would still have the right to live in Scotland under the Common Travel Area. Also, EU citizens who were given UK settled status after Brexit will be allowed to continue their lives in Scotland. But that's not the same as citizenship. So what special rights do citizens have? Citizens can fully participate in the economic, social and political life of their country. Citizens have the lifetime right to work in their country and to enter or leave it as they wish. A Scottish citizen can hold a Scottish passport and seek assistance abroad from Scotland's future network of embassies and consulates. If Scotland rejoins the EU, we would also have access to all foreign embassies run by our EU fellow countries. Scottish citizens will also have the right to live and work in all EU member countries, assuming EU or EEA membership. So Scottish citizens would enjoy more rights than folk in England or Wales. So who is a citizen on day one of independence? Citizenship is open to all UK citizens living in Scotland at the point of independence. Also, Scottish citizenship is offered to all people born in Scotland, even if they have now moved away. You can also become Scottish if one of your parents was a UK citizen who was born in Scotland. Finally, anyone from England, Northern Ireland or Wales who once lived in Scotland for 10 years may become Scottish. So these four groups can be Scottish citizens by entitlement. The government recognises other groups who may also want to become Scottish, and this is known in law as naturalisation. So if you're not automatically Scottish, how do you become Scottish? Firstly, you pay. The Scottish Government notes that naturalisation into the UK costs about £1,330 per adult and £1,012 for children. So that's almost £5,000 for a family of four. No mean amount of money. Because the Scottish Government wants to encourage folk to live and work here, they propose the naturalisation fee should cover the admin costs. The briefing paper doesn't give an actual fee, but notes the admin costs for the UK are just over £400 per person. British and Irish citizens may register as a citizen after 5 years of living in Scotland. The same applies to EU citizens. New migrants to the UK who have settled status may also apply once they have spent 5 years in Scotland. Migrants who have arrived in Scotland under a humanitarian route, e.g. those fleeing persecution, may also apply for citizenship after 5 or 6 years. What about children? If a baby is born in Scotland, can he or she claim Scottish citizenship? Well, maybe. If one of the child's parents was a UK or Irish citizen or an immigrant with settled status, then yes. But people just passing through, citizenship may not be available unless the child later shows that they have strong links to Scotland. However, children who have been brought up in Scotland may apply for citizenship, no matter where their parents come from. So how could all this become a reality? Firstly, Scotland needs to become an independent country. Secondly, these proposals would go to the Scottish Parliament for approval. Thirdly, Parliament needs to choose one of these two routes. 1. Citizenship rules could be written up as an Act of Parliament to become law. Or 2. The rights and responsibilities of citizens could be defined in a new Scottish Constitution. Paper 4 in the Building a New Scotland series puts forward suggestions for Scotland's democratic constitution. We'll summarise the paper in a future podcast. Finally, if I'm entitled to citizenship, how do I get a Scottish passport? A passport office will have to be set up. The design and security of passports will follow the advice and guidance of the EU. So Scottish passports will be burgundy with the same size of passport book as other EU countries. Your passport will need to be renewed in 10 years or in 5 years for a child. Does everyone like these proposals? Well, Jamie Hepburn, Minister for Independence, said these proposals redefine what it means to be a citizen of this country and that they offer a fair and welcoming approach to those who have made Scotland their home. And there is extra allowances for people who are studying in this country and who want to stay after their studies have finished. Alexander Stewart for the Conservative Party said these independence plans are a blatant misuse of public money. Civil servants are supposed to support the government's agenda, not push nationalists' pet project or at taxpayers' expense. Now you might think that the above proposals are part of the SNP Green government agenda, so why should government employees not work on them? The majority party of government, the SNP, has policy from its conference in 2023 to put independence at the top of its manifesto in the UK general election, to be called by the outgoing Tory government sometime this year. These briefing papers form part of that campaign, and we at News for Scotland look forward to the debate on the different visions of Scotland which the parties will put to our voters. Thank you.
You're listening to News for Scotland's Newscast 14 on Friday 2nd February 2024. It's news where we are.
Hello folks, it's Jeanette Hill here again, and I'm here in the studio with Joe Murray, who is one of our founding members at News for Scotland, but he has lots of other sides to him, and here he's going to tell us a little bit about himself. Hello Joe.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Do you want to give a wee introduction to yourself, Joe?
Oh God, how long's the show going to be? Yeah, well, I'm Joe Murray, and for my sins, I am one of the directors of News for Scotland. I am also a director of Pollockshaw's Borough Hall. We've got a lot of work going on there just now as well. But in the creative arts, I've worked in the creative arts for many years. I was an editor of West Coast Magazine, editor and publisher of Taranis Brooks and of Mythic Horse Press. And before that, I was a pipe fitter welder in the oil business, oil construction. After I left West Coast Magazine and publishing, I went to university because I was always interested in ecology and the environment. So maybe you've picked up on some of my little essays that we've done here. And I came out with a PhD, so I'm now Dr. Joe Murray, yeah. And so for I've had about 3 careers in my life, and they've all been reasonably successful. This is like a 4th one after my retirement, so I'm banging the table here, I shouldn't do that. But
you're a busy man.
Oh yeah, I'm quite busy, but as I was saying to you before, because we do know each other, of course, that being retired and being busy is a bit different from having to work and scrabble about because you have to. It's a bit different when you're working on your own accord. It's a lot better, I think.
It is.
No, I think it is a lot better. Yeah.
No, I agree. More control over your own hours, what you're doing, what you want to do, your own interests. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm doing the things I enjoy now, and you signed me up for this News for Scotland.
We did.
You did, you horrible woman, because it's been really, really busy. I've been doing a lot of technical stuff at the back end, but it's been quite busy. It's taken a lot of time, but it's been enjoyable as well. So, and hopefully other people have been listening and enjoying it as well. So that's the point. But it's also, as we know, about trying to put a bit more clarity into the news, be a bit more positive about the nation we live in. So
absolutely.
Yeah. But that aside, we'll be talking about my creative side tonight, I think, yeah.
Indeed, yeah. And on that note, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your writing, Joe?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been writing poetry since I was a boy, but way back when you're a kid, you're a teenager, it's just horrible stuff full of teenage angst. But, you get married, you have kids, and it all falls away. But when I was in my 30s, early 30s, I began writing again, to get away from the stress of working out in the freezing cold. I mean, I spent about 20 winters, out in the cold, and I started writing poetry again, and I began to really enjoy it. I wasn't very good at the start, but nobody is. But I began to enjoy it, and then I decided to take it a wee bit more seriously, and I went to a night class in Glasgow University where I met some friends who are still friends to this day, 30 odd years on. So I'm getting very old now. If you do the math, you've worked it, I'm quite old now. But that kind of changed my direction in life because I was getting really fed up spending the winter outside working in oil refineries and oil platforms and all sorts of things like that. So poetry gave me a different direction in life. All of it accidental, actually. It was just I get paid off once, and then suddenly we started a magazine out of nowhere. We'd never done anything like it before, and we were ragingly successful at it. It was a very popular magazine, and it was done. We produced it all ourselves in house, and it was the start of all the desktop publishing and stuff. So ours looked pretty professional right from the off, and it became very popular, and we ran it for about 10 years. But that gave me a new direction in life, and it helped me progress my poetry and my writing, short stories and things like that as well. So.
Can I ask, what was the name of that magazine, Joe?
That was called West Coast Magazine. It ran for about 10 years, and it was very popular. We published quite a lot of. It was aimed at new writers in Scotland, regardless of whether they were Scottish or not. We aimed at new writers, new writing, and there are some very famous writers now that we kind of gave a chance to at the start. We published at the start. Though they would have been famous anyway because we're very good at what they did. But it was about trying to give new writers the break they needed to get them off and running. I think we were quite successful in that.
Great, it's a great idea. Quite interesting what you said there about you when you were stressed with your job, how you found a sort of way out of the stress through writing, which
Yeah,
is
it was quite accidental. I was just doing it and I realised just how good it made me feel, and how a lot of the others, because your head was thinking about thinking creatively. A lot of
yeah.
practical stuff kind of fell away a little bit, and it gave me some peace, and it was quite enjoyable. And it's been doing that ever since. So I highly recommend it as even as therapy. And I've actually seen it work as therapy. I worked with survivors poetry for a while, and I saw just how the creative arts really does help people's mental health and well-being. So it certainly did it for me, and I've seen it actually in action with other people who desperately needed some break away from maybe even themselves or whatever, and how therapeutic it can be. Yeah.
I think I've seen that a bit with Jim Ferguson's work. He does
Yes.
some of that, doesn't he, as well? People with
Yes, yeah,
depression.
I've known Jim for I've known Jim
Yeah,
for about 35 years now, yeah. And he's a wonderful writer, brilliant guy, but he's a wonderful writer too. And yeah, he's a tutor as well. And Jim's got a PhD as well now, yeah. We've all went down that road. Well, Jim's is in creative writing, it's in literature of a sort. I can't remember exactly what his title is, but yeah, Jim does a lot of work like that with people, and he's very good at it too. Yeah.
so, on that note, do you want to tell us about the current book that's about to be launched and some information about your launch?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's plugging time, is it? Yeah. Plug the
Indeed, it
book
is,
now.
Joe.
Yes. Yes. I've got a book of poetry being launched on Tuesday at Avant Garde, 7 o'clock on Tuesday in Avant Garde. That's the 6th of February. And it's a collection of poetry, my personal favourite poetry. The reason I put the book together was I've lost so many poems throughout my life. I'm quite careless. But I've got this folder of death in my computers where you put stuff in, forget about it, and then move computers, and you suddenly remember, when that poem I wrote, and then you can't find it anymore, you know. So,
Yeah.
I'm getting a wee bit old now, and there's some things that I really like and don't want to lose. And I thought the best way to keep them, put them in a book, Joe. Put them in a book, then you'll have them forever, you know. So that was the impetus for actually putting this book together. But I
Great
actually
idea.
wrote, sorry,
I'm just saying, great idea, to keep it. I understand
yeah,
what you
yeah,
mean by that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Then I've got to hope someone will publish it for you. But so yes, I put this together. So it started off as a collection of poetry that was personal to me and that I really enjoyed. But I've written quite a lot of new stuff for it as well. So it made me write again, which was great. So it's been a little labour of love. There's a lot of poems in it from all across my life. Little ones I've picked up from that I've never forgotten. Have always been special to me, and some of the new stuff is I'm really pleased with as well. So I'm actually really pleased overall with what I've produced here, and I'm looking forward to other people getting to read it now. So
And the name of your book?
yes, the book is called Walking on Skerig, and it's subtitled 70
Ah,
for 70. There's 70 poems in here, and I will be 70 on the day of the launch, so so that's why it's called that. But the Walking on Skerig, this was Skerig, as it's actually properly known, is up near Ullapool. It's in Loch Broom, where it's right between Little Loch Broom and Loch Broom. It's a little peninsula, and I spent half a summer there about 25 years ago. And it's an absolutely wonderful place. It's completely off the grid. There's no road into it. It's like you've got to walk round a big mountain to get in. Well, there is a footpath, but it's quite excluded, and there's a community living there that was off the grid. And I just finished my environmental science degree, and it was really a wonderful place to spend some time. I wrote a lot of poems there, and the title poem, "Walking on Skurrig," was something I wrote. It's quite an emotive little series of poems that I've completely forgotten about. One or two get published quite soon after I come home, but I think it was Northwards magazine that published a couple, and then I completely forgot about it and discovered it a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and I was really pleased. 'Cause I really enjoyed reading them again, and so they're actually the core of the book. That little series of poems. There's another few series. There's another booklet's worth of poems in here that I wrote for for STEM poets, the science, technology, engineering, and maths.
Yes.
And they're about climate change, and I quite liked them. I was going to put them every time I was going to publish them in a booklet. I never got round to it, but they're in here now. So, and again, these were written to try and teach people. I'm a teacher,
Yeah.
I was a lecturer and teacher, and I worked with children, worked with people from nursery school to my age now, so I've worked with people right across all the generations in teaching and learning. And it's when I write things, I do kind of like people to get something from it, that maybe walk away with a little bit of knowledge they never had before.
Yeah.
Not all my poems are like that, but as many as I try to put that element into poems when I'm writing them, that people kind of go away with a little bit more understanding about the thing I was writing about. So the STEM poems, the this is climate changing poems are in there too. So I'm quite pleased with them now.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, amazing. And the book launch will be next Tuesday, is that right?
Next Tuesday, 6th of February,
Yeah.
and it's in Avant-Garde. If you want to come along,
Yeah,
it'd be nice. It'd be quite nice to see as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what it'll be. We'll have some music. We've got some great poets reading with me.
Yeah.
If anyone knows the poetry world, Graham Fulton. He's a brilliant poet. He was a contemporary of Jim Ferguson's as well.
Yeah.
They were the itinerant poets, and I met them about 35, 36 years ago, and we've been friends ever since. They're absolutely brilliant bunch of poets. And Graham's reading for us. He's an absolutely brilliant performer. We've got Charlie Gracie, who's an absolutely wonderful poet. He'll be reading with as well. And then there's the absolutely brilliant Wanderlust women who have actually had the privilege of actually doing wanderlusting with emphasis on the wander, by the way. So yeah, we toured Dublin and Paris 2 years ago, and that was brilliant. We were kind of trying to promote Scottish arts and literature in Europe because we've been taken out now. And we get brilliant responses from people in Paris and in Dublin, and everybody else we've gone as well, especially in Europe. And they're really pleased to see you. And there's a whole movement now in Europe. It's called Europeans for Scotland. And and most major cities in Europe have members of this group in it, and they do a lot of events trying to convince everyone in Europe they should be supporting Scotland to go back into Europe again. So that's absolutely brilliant. So there's lots and lots of people in Europe would love to see us back in there again. I haven't written any poems about that, but maybe I should.
For the next book, Joe.
Yeah, for the next, somebody else. If your next book, you should do this. I'm at my next book. I'm just worried about this one just now, But yeah, who knows? Yeah, the next one, yeah.
Do you want to give us a little, a rendition of something?
Oh, you want a flavour of it? You want me to read for you as well? Seconds for my supper here, aye. Yeah, okay, I'll read a couple for you. The book has got poems in English, poems in Scots, and there's wee touches of Gaelic in it here and there, but just the occasional phrase, because I don't speak Gaelic. I do speak Scots though, because I'm mostly Glaswegian Scots, but I've been loving writing in Scots and learning more and remembering all the words that I've lost throughout my life that were quite common to me when I was young. That my granny and granda spoke, my mother even, and we seem to have lost an awful lot of it. So I've had great fun sort of just writing in Scots and learning it again. And it's an absolutely wonderful language. It's not a slang, it's a real language. And I've taken some poems I've written in the past in English and translated them into Scots. And they're much better. They're much better poems for it, I think, for me anyway. So let me see, what will I read for you? Oh, here's one. I do write a lot about nature as well, I have to say, because it's my love. I never feel at home anywhere than I do in a woodland. I just love being in woodlands. There's just something. I must have been a wild animal in a past life or something, because I just love. I was a countryside ranger as well. I never told you that. I worked as a countryside ranger for the National Trust for Scotland for a few years, and it was the most wonderful job, working in some of the most beautiful places in Scotland. But this one here is a little series of poems about the last wolf pack. And as you know, the last wolf in Scotland was killed in the 18th century. And this is called The Last Wolf in Scotland. Above the Garry, on the braes or the Killicrankie, A grey mist falls as she creeps on her lane among the shimmering aspen. Hunger gnaws at her belly. She growls a sore anger at her world now made wrong. Searching, ever searching for her kin and finding not a trace. Her mate fallen to the lance, her young to the gun and bow, and she now the last wolf in this place, a truth she could never know. Pack hunt days now gone, soft and silent as cloud, she pads through a darkened wood, aches for the scent of prey, a hope to feed on something more than newts and frogs, a rabbit, pigeon, pheasant, or to find a squirrel's dray. Suddenly the rank reek that stinks of human body sweat and breath drifts heavy on the air, fills her head with fear as slowly she sinks into shrub, soft and cold and wet, to wait for Lochiel's gillies to roust her from her lair. Where in the open the Cameron's gun will end the ancient reign of Canis Lupus, the magnificent wolves of a wild and once full of wonder Scotland.
Wow, that's amazing. Absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
And can I
Yeah.
just say,
I'll
good
give you another
luck
bit if you
on.
want.
Yeah,
Right,
go for it if you want.
I'll give you a love poem. Let me see now. It's this is a poem I wrote while I was working as a ranger, and I was in my little cot house waiting for 10 o'clock to phone home to my wee darling. And I wrote this in between 9:30 and 10 o'clock when I was to phone her, and I read it out to her on the phone. It's hardly changed since I wrote it, but it's called This Kiss. It's a love poem. This pink moon is your mouth as our lips fade to stars. The distance between us is both vast and slight, and you, my universe. In this gentle breeze, your breath warms my face in the cold dark of night, a scent that is of honeysuckle. Ah, there is no Eden but you, my heaven, and your tongue is mimosa. I taste it, savour it, this kiss. I am wrapped in a cosmos of wonder, and you, my ground, my earth. Across this space we reach out, embrace, a quantum touch, a merging of atoms, of elemental particles. No more distances, no more boundaries. But still, I am me, you are you, yet we have become one, and everything is one, everything is love, and you and I, we are everything. There you go, we love poem.
Beautiful. Oh, you're quite emotional there.
It's a favourite poem. It's quite a special poem, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming to talk to us, Joe.
Yeah, you're very welcome, yeah.
I know you're a busy man, and good luck with Tuesday. And
yes,
lots of folk getting there, hopefully. And
well, hopefully too. I think there's a few people want to come along, but my only worry is the weather. I think we're due another beast from the east. As long as it comes on Wednesday, I don't care.
Right. Okay, thank you for that, Joe.
Very welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you. Bye now.
See you soon. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to News for Scotland. See you next time. News for Scotland, news where we are.